Drop the beat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the High Noon Hot Seat, brought to you by High Noon Podcast. I am your host, as always, the Blevins. With me is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Not too much. I waved, even though my camera's not on.
Yeah, none of our cameras are on.
That's just a habit. That's just, I'm going to do that forever.
And also joining us on the hot seat today is a former Blizzard employee of almost 5 years. He was the eSports coordinator there, and now the director of player personnel for the newly announced New York Excelsior, Scott Tester, better known as Bearhands. Hello, sir. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me, you guys.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for coming, man. Yeah, appreciate it. Busy day for you today. Making the time really means a lot to us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a crazy day, but you know, I'm really excited about the roster announce, and I'm a big fan of you guys' podcast, so it's cool to be on.
Excellent. Well, we've seen you in the chat a couple times. It's always humbled us, so it's great to actually get an opportunity to sit down and talk with you. Yeah,
it's in Death. Now we can mark down a fourth person that watches the podcast.
That's true. 4 official listeners.
Confirmed. But yeah, so for those of you who are watching in the future, I'd just like to toot our own horn here and say that the roster and branding announcement was literally today as we're recording. So super busy day for Scott, and super exciting for us to have this opportunity. But let's jump right into it. Like we always do, like to get to know our guests a little bit better. So Scott, tell us your gaming origin story.
Okay, so I've given this some thought because I know you guys always ask all of your guests this. And I think it really started when I was like maybe 5 years old, and my dad brought home a Tandy 1000. So I'm probably dating myself.
I don't even know what that is.
Scott, you're blowing my mind. That was my first computer. Like, this is like deja vu. It's like we lived the same life. This is insane.
So yeah, it was crazy. We had this Tandy 1000, and it had no hard drive. Like, that was not a thing yet. And it was just 5 1/4-inch floppy disks, and I used to play like King's Quest games and like old Sierra adventure games.
Most of the games were like educational, right? Like I remember like
a lot of them, yeah.
Goofy teaching me how to spell in my first video game.
Yeah, there were a lot of like Carmen Sandiego, you know, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I played those games too.
Yeah. So like that's really what kind of got me started on it. I played those games with my sister when I was super young, and it just kind of has continued ever since. In terms of professional, like my career in gaming, it started in QA like about 10 years ago at a company called THQ that no longer exists. And I was a QA tester on a game called Dawn of War, which I'm still a big fan of. And I worked at various studios throughout my career, and I finally went to Blizzard and started on their QA team working on Diablo 3. And I worked on that for a little while and kind of just worked my way up throughout the QA team. And right after the Titan technical reboot, when they really started working on Overwatch, I joined the QA team as one of the assistant QA leads on the Overwatch team. And that's kind of where all of this started.
Oh, wow. So you're like OG into Overwatch, like from the beginning.
Not from the super beginning, but like pretty close after the tech reboot.
What I took from that, Scott, is if that you had been considerably worse at your job, I would have had like countless hours of my life back. Not playing quite so much Diablo over my time.
Yeah. That's maybe true.
Yeah, that's awesome. So obviously now you're the director of player personnel for the New York Excelsior. Obviously super exciting with the Overwatch League coming up and whatnot. But so with all of that on your plate, how much do you actually get to play, sit down on your own time and play Overwatch?
Quite a bit. Like until maybe 2 or 3 months ago, like I would play Overwatch every night. From when it was still an internal alpha. And I remember Jeff Kaplan at a team meeting one time put up a stat that was just showing how much like the internal Overwatch team was playing Overwatch. And I was like in the top 5 for hours played.
Nice.
So like I felt pretty good about that.
That is pretty awesome. Okay, so Death, I think this is our best shot to ever get it in there. So we've had this. You've mentioned that you're a fan, but we've had this running joke for a very, very long time now, that during when they closed in between beta 1 and beta 2, we just need you to confirm this real fast. Yeah, we need to confirm this real quick. So in between beta 1 and beta 2, there was a time where no one could play, and we had this running gag that Deathblow had a physical copy of Overwatch way before it was released and was playing 1v1 versus Jeff Kaplan on Kings Row back then. Can you confirm or deny this? Oh, well, actually, hold on. I know you're under NDA, so you know what? I'm not. I apologize for asking the question. You don't need to answer that. We don't want to get you in trouble.
I mean, I can answer that question. Like it's technically possible. So I mean, the answer to your question is I don't know, because like it's possible. Like Jeff does all sorts of stuff. You know, like I don't know.
The dream is still alive.
A Blizzard insider can neither confirm nor deny. He can't rule it out.
I definitely can't deny it.
I'll take it. We'll run with that.
We're you know what? Say no more, please. Please don't say anything else. Okay, so the last thing we'll grill you on in terms of your playing of Overwatch. What's your personal SR?
My personal SR is not super good. Like I think I don't even know. Like I say, it's been a few months. Like I haven't really played much this season.
I guarantee you're not worse than I am, because there's very little room below.
But I'm hoping to be better.
No, I'm like borderline platinum, like high gold platinum.
Okay, so we're at about the same place.
Scott, you want to 1v1 me?
Sure.
On Kings Row. No, we'll have to play sometime, but Death can't because he's big time in us. Also, he has like 50 hours of scrims a day. So moving on, you mentioned that you were doing some QA stuff with Blizzard, but you were also doing eSports stuff with Blizzard, right?
Yeah, for the last year or year and a half-ish that I was at Blizzard, I was in the eSports department, specifically working on Overwatch.
Okay, so what exactly, that you can say, were you doing with eSports with Overwatch?
Most of the stuff that I worked on, going back to the beginning, as soon as I joined the department, it was right before World Cup last year. So at the beginning, I was super focused on World Cup, and I was one of the admins, like on-stage referees for World Cup last year. So that was kind of my big first thing. But after that, like I started moving into a lot more like tournament design and map pool stuff. So I worked a lot on contenders, and having come from the Overwatch development team in the QA department, I already had a good relationship with all of the development team members of Overwatch. So I kind of acted as the liaison between eSports and the development team, just because I had that relationship already.
Gotcha. So two things. If you were a big part of being in World Cup last year, then you probably heard me screaming Pluppy at the top of my lungs when Sweden was playing. And two, I just got to say hats off for working on Contenders, because I've got to say Contenders has been one of my favorite tournament series to watch and cover of all time. It was just great. So kudos for that.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Like, I've really enjoyed how Contenders has turned out, and like a huge shout out to Adam Rizhievsky and the guys at Carbon that have been killing it since day one on Contenders. Like, we've just had a really good team around us, and it has enabled those guys to produce a super high quality show. Yeah,
it just, I mean, I think the storylines kind of created themselves, but they wouldn't have been there wouldn't have been the opportunity for those storylines to really develop like they did if the tournament hadn't been made so well. So just huge shout outs for that. Death,
I don't know.
Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't know how you made it so that way in Envision and Gamers Origins shot up out of nowhere at the beginning of that tournament, but great job on that. But in all seriousness, so thank you very much, because like Blevin said, just a phenomenal tournament series so far. Can't wait to see it continue on with, and kind of continue to feed the Overwatch League. But we do want to shift the priority or the focus here over to your current position over in New York with Excelsior. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about leaving Blizzard and joining the team and joining this organization. I mean, just from a perspective of being, a huge nerd that loves video games, I can't imagine it's easy to walk away from a position at Blizzard. So tell us about that decision.
What makes it a lot harder is that Blizzard has what they call service rewards. And if you work for Blizzard for 5 years, you get a sword, like a physical sword with like a nameplate and everything, and it's super awesome. And I would have gotten my sword on December 5th or something. So that made the decision more difficult.
Yeah.
I think it really goes back to like a team meeting where I saw Nate Nanzer kind of pitch the idea for Overwatch League to the Overwatch development team. And as soon as I saw that meeting, I was like, oh my God, like I'm a big fan of traditional sports like the NFL and Major League Baseball and that kind of stuff. So when I saw how he had kind of taken a lot of the really cool aspects of pro traditional sports and sort of applied it to esports in a way that hadn't really been done successfully in the past, like it was really appealing to me. So I knew immediately that I wanted to be involved with it, and that's kind of what prompted me to move into the esports department. And then after being there and kind of working on some of the things and beginning the work on Overwatch League, I kind of realized that I think I would be able to do more good for the league from a team perspective and really helping build out like a super successful team. So that's kind of my goal with New York and why it was interesting to me. And New York specifically, I think it was kind of at the top of my list of teams just because of the history they have with traditional sports and like the world-class status of the city itself.
Yeah, definitely a bright spotlight there in New York. So I'm sure that ramps up the pressure a little bit. But nonetheless, we'll be rooting for you, as obviously we're both New York natives. So it would be in our best interest to see you guys succeed as well, as it's probably one of the home games we're most likely to be able to make it to, or one of the games and sites we'll most likely be able to get to once everything's played at the home stadiums. But now, this director of player personnel position that you hold, as somebody who's also a big fan of traditional sports, it seems to me like it's a lot very similar to what a GM would do for an NFL team. Is that roughly what your job is, or can you tell us a little bit about your duties in that position?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of related to that. I think it's difficult to answer that question because even within the NFL, like what a GM does for the Dallas Cowboys might not be exactly the same as what a GM does for the Buffalo Bills,
100%, yeah.
So, I mean, I would say it's related, but I think our solution is just maybe not quite the same in terms of responsibilities and roles and stuff like that. I think right now the organization is, we're just getting started. We have to build out a whole esports org in a way that like a team like Immortals or Misfits don't really have to do, right? So I think right now everyone is kind of involved in pretty much every aspect of the team. But as we build and grow things out, like that will probably change, and my role will be a lot more focused on our roster and getting them the things that they need to succeed.
Gotcha. So while you're currently building out this organization and hiring the infrastructure as well as the talent, can you tell us how big was the team that was involved in selecting this roster? Who else was involved or consulted, or was it basically, a solo project by you?
I mean, I don't want to say it was a solo project by me. It was a discussion, I think, with me and the guys from Sterling who own the team. But those guys are not super versed in the competitive scene of Overwatch, right? Like, they've watched some matches and a couple of them went to the Apex finals, which I think was, super awesome. But I think in general, in terms of like strategical direction, strategical is not a word. In terms of the direction, in terms of the direction of the specific players that we wanted to sign, I think it was mostly my input.
Okay. And can you tell us, did you hold tryouts or did you already, I mean, because you basically say, at least signed most of an entire roster here, and we'll give that entire roster after you answer this question, since we haven't yet, and we probably should have already. But, you know, were there tryouts or did you already know what you wanted and you were just able to kind of go out and bring them in?
We didn't really hold tryouts in the way that is typically thought of throughout esports, in that the majority of our team comes from one pre-existing roster. There were a couple of additions to that, and those guys played with the rest of our roster, and we had that discussion with our coaching staff, and it was kind of a team decision at that point in terms of who to bring in to sort of fill out our roster. But I don't think it was, when you say tryouts in esports, and specifically in Overwatch, I think it gives people a specific impression of like this process, and I don't think we necessarily followed that process.
Okay. And that roster, of course, and by all means, Scott, after I butcher their IGNs, you just go ahead and correct me right away. Sabio LB. Yeah, there you go. I was considerably closer than I thought I would be at DPS, and then you've got Libero on DPS/Flex. Meko, am I saying that right?
Yep.
On off tank, and then we've got Mono on tank, Giannis on tank, Pine on support/DPS, Arc on support, and Jay Jonik on support as well.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think the only one you didn't nail was Say by LB.
Yeah, that one was impossible. I didn't have expectations.
Unpronounceable.
And then at head coach, of course, you've got Pavane, and then let's see, we've also got Wizard Hyung at coach, and then Andrew as the assistant coach, and then of course yourself as the director of player personnel. So maybe one thing to add in here. Can you tell us, anybody who doesn't know, this is a large chunk of the Luxury Watch Blue roster from the Korean scene. Anybody not from that squad, and how did you find them, and what made you bring them in?
Yeah, I think the two players you're talking about are Libero and Arc. Arc played for Luxury Watch Red before, so that was their sister team, and there was already some familiarity there. But he's also a player that I had watched compete before I even got involved with New York, and the same thing is true of Libero. Actually, Meta Athena is Libero played for Meta Athena before. That was one of my favorite teams in Apex, just because I think they always tended to bring new strategies that you kind of didn't see other teams run. And the same thing with Arc. He's just been a really phenomenal player in kind of the short time that he's been around on the scene. So I'm really excited about adding both of those players to this team, and I think we're going to have a lot of success with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obviously you guys picked up the most of the roster from that existing Luxury Watch Blue roster in Korea. What was the most compelling thing about this team specifically that made you want to bring them over from Korea to New York City?
For me, it was that they have always kind of been one of the most competitive teams in Apex, but I also sort of think that they have the most room to improve. I think their ceiling is probably a lot higher than a team like Lunatic High, for example, who has been super dominant basically throughout the whole history of competitive Overwatch. But I kind of feel like those guys, they've got a couple of players that are, older and maybe getting, I'm not suggesting that Rouge Hong is going to retire, but those guys are older than the average Overwatch League player. And, I feel like they have maybe closer to their competitive ceiling than some of the guys from Luxury Watch.
Gotcha.
Rouge Hong is outdated and Miro is overrated. Gotcha.
What is not what I'm saying.
We read between the lines.
I have a huge amount of respect for those guys.
NYXL revealed, and now you're debated.
Don't mind us. We love rivalries, so don't mind us just randomly trying to start
just creating them. No, Deathblow already created a rivalry with LA Valiant with the podcast. Thanks for that, Deathblow. I'd just like to say, for the record, that's 100% Deathblow, not me.
It's also 100% accurate. Nothing I said.
No comment. Let's keep things at least marginally on topic. So one of the things that's been talked about, it's been at least rumored that the New York team was going to be from Luxury Watch. I mean, that's like almost one of the oldest rumors we've had. And obviously now it's been confirmed. one of the things that's been talked about is the marketability. For Overwatch League specific, in general, obviously marketability is a huge thing because it's not just necessarily about winning and losing. It's about the marketability of the team, and specifically for a full Korean roster in the U.S. So talk to us a little bit about maybe the challenges you expect to face when, marketing a full Korean roster as the New York City team.
I think some of that, my answer really is going to speak to the level of respect that I have for the history of sports in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really the only way to come into that kind of a market and offer something that is worthy of the city is to have a team that's going to compete and win.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my goal really is to put together a roster that could compete at the highest level. And I think the strongest marketing asset that we can have initially is our ability to win matches.
Mm-hmm.
Long term, I think we'll continue to look at players from all over the world and recruit whoever makes sense to add to our team. But initially in the first season, I think the best way to bring this team to New York, the first esports team representing the city, is to have a team that's competitive.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely makes a lot of sense, and we've kind of talked about both sides of that, and really kind of the, your method is, okay, let's build the best team we can right now, win. That's going to be our marketability, as being a great team, and I mean that speaks heavily to the New York City, mantra. Obviously, the history of the Mets, the Yankees, and the Knicks. I mean, not recently with the Knicks, but the Knicks traditionally have a history of victory and of success. So that makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, we've seen teams like the San Francisco Shock, which is almost completely the opposite in terms of how they built their team. They kind of went for a hodgepodge of players and picking players from different teams for different roles versus Excelsior kind of coming in with a full team. What's your thought process? I mean, you talked about it a little bit. What's your thought process on maybe the difference between those two strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely respect the approach that San Francisco has taken. Like, I think there's a lot that can be gained from sort of picking and choosing the best players from each position that represent your team and are players that you want to work with and that sort of thing. And I totally understand that, and I think that's a great strategy. I just think that we wanted guys that could play with cohesion and team chemistry kind of right out of the gates. There's not a lot of time to sort of ramp up. Like, we're going to be playing league matches pretty quickly. And between that and sort of moving them from Korea to Los Angeles to compete in this, and like there's going to be culture shock, and like there's already a lot of pressure these guys are going to be under,
Yeah.
So I think a lot of this is just making sure that they're comfortable and able to play with a team that they're comfortable playing with, to try and ensure success.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense, and I think there's definitely merit to both sides. So really, I'm interested to see how each is going to turn out. Obviously, we'll be rooting for the New York team because that's where we are from, and also the color scheme is better. But that's neither here nor there. So I got a question from A Smith in the chat that was asking, and you mentioned kind of the culture shock of a full Korean roster coming to the U.S. Are the guys going to be learning English, or are they going to?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
I think they've already started taking English lessons. We found this really cool vendor that has done this kind of thing in the past with sort of teams of other genres or whatever, and like they've had some really great results. So yeah, we're definitely trying to teach all of our players English so that they can be guests on your podcast.
Well, that's awesome.
And that's absolutely why we asked that question.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, one thing I will say is that regardless of whether they're going to be learning English or not, their English is going to be significantly better than our Korean. So they can always rest assured of that. So on the roster list on the website, we saw that the players have numbers associated with them. Can you talk a little bit about what those numbers are, what they mean, what they represent?
Yeah, sure. I feel a lot better talking about this after Flame has already sort of tweeted about it. But, yeah, players are required by the league to have sort of jersey numbers like you would see in traditional sports.
Oh, nice.
So that's what those represent, as their jersey numbers.
That is pretty sweet. I'm going to claim my own jersey number now. It's 34. For anyone who, I'm just putting it out here on public, I am number 34. I'm the only one. Anyone else is copying me and owes me $5 every time they use it.
You guys were joking about Cool Matt earlier, but what I'm really hoping that the solution to this is...
Yeah, that needs to be what happens, 100%.
Yeah, that is true.
I don't have any specific insight, but, you know.
If he's not number 69, it's a travesty, and I don't know, we'll write letters or something. We'll organize a campaign.
Wherever he officially ends up, which has not been confirmed yet, but wherever he ends up,
right,
if you don't let him...
he's in the Overwatch League, right?
Yeah, oh yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
he might not be. He could be an Overwatch League outlaw of some kind.
Yeah, he might not be on Houston. Definitely might not be. But if he doesn't get to be number 69, someone should be fired. I'm just putting it out there.
All right, and moving us along a bit here, Scott. You didn't want to bite on the rivalry we offered you, okay? But somebody else seems to be offering you a rivalry opportunity here, and it's one I personally hope you absolutely take. Who do you think will be your biggest rival before we talk about who called you out?
Right. I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, we did link his tweet.
Yeah. Well, like I actually called him out first, so we gotta back up a little bit. When they made he was doing an Ask Me Anything.
Yeah.
It was like Ask Huck or whatever.
Yeah.
And I tweeted to him like, what was it? It was like, are you ready to continue the proud Boston tradition of losing to New York?
Well,
but he didn't respond to my tweet, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like, we'll see what kind of rivalries naturally develop. I know there's a huge history of Boston and New York, and like I think it would be fun. But I also think like, you know, the Seoul Dynasty might make a lot of sense given that we both have rosters of largely Korean descent.
plus I made that sweet copy pasta for you. Like you can just kind of send that out in a newsletter. Like that'll be good.
So all right, well, like, we'll see. I think that's going to be one of the fun things about the first season of Overwatch League, though.
If there's anything I can do to convince you to hate Boston and give them a hard time at every possible turn, let me know, and I'm more than happy to accommodate that for you.
Okay, so I have
Sure.
a follow up in here because Overwatch World Cup is coming up, and I'm going to be at BlizzCon, and I know what I'm going to be doing at BlizzCon, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this. We've asked people in the past about this, but I think it's going to be maybe a bigger thing once we start seeing traditional sports fans move into the Overwatch League and we start to get some of that traditional sports fan, groundswell. What are your thoughts on booing in esports? I gotta know.
Oh man, that's a good question.
It's so contested, and I know you might have to be political about it because of your position. So if that's the case, it's fine.
So.
But that's what I like to hear.
That's a good question. Honestly, I hadn't really considered it. What it makes me think of, though, is something that happened during Contenders when there was a very well-known player. I don't want to call him out, but he was given a warning by the Contenders staff for he was teabagging people in the game, right? And he was given a warning, and I was kind of surprised that they had warned him. So I started a conversation with the rest of the esports department at Blizzard about it. And there was no rule against it, right?
Yeah.
So, that's, I don't know, booing in esports, personally, I don't have a problem with it. I think, you're just engaging in the event, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know, I haven't really given that a lot of thought. That's an interesting question.
Yes.
Yeah. As traditional sports fans, we've been huge advocates, and we've gone so far as to encourage anybody that will listen to us talk to, when you're at an esports event, pick a side, root for them, and then boo the other side. It's so much more fun. I really think if people just went out there and just got themselves wholly invested in one side over the other, good guys versus bad guys, and really went with it. Like, I think people would just have a whole lot more fun as spectators at the event. It's my favorite thing about going to like a Bills game or a Sabres game. You know, it's that us versus them. I don't care. Like, it's just nothing else matters. Like, it
makes me think of the World Series that's happening right now. Like, I don't know if you guys are baseball fans, but this is one of the best World Series I've seen in my lifetime, right? Yeah. And Reddick from the Houston Astros used to be on the Dodgers, and when he came out at Dodger Stadium, they booed him loudly. And like, you know, it's kind of part of sports, and I think if esports is going to be part of sports, like, you got to be ready for that aspect of it.
Yeah, because when I go to that Bills game, I'm thinking to myself, man, what can I possibly do to help my team win?
Right.
Like, I want to be a part of it. I don't want to watch it happen. I want to be a part of it, and I want to help.
And you see that in the NFL. You see false starts because of crowd noise.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and I think it's something we have to embrace as esports, and we have to encourage. You know, just think of like the fan bases like Philadelphia, who have a team in the Overwatch League. Like, if they're not booing, nobody's going to boo. So I don't even know what to do. And then, you know, like the Oakland Raiders in football, like, these are bad guys. Like, it's okay to be a bad guy and to play the quote unquote heel. And I hope more teams kind of take on that role and run with it. But moving us along here, I want to discuss the branding a little bit, as we got that fully announced today. And our apologies for finding the name a little bit early. So we've known that one and had that one for a little bit. You have a very interesting and I think unique team name here. It's one that stands out when you look at the list of them, I think, more than any of the other ones. The New York Excelsior. Will you guys be going by a shortened name? I mean, when we look at the New York Metropolitans and the New York Knickerbockers, and that's the first time a lot of people have ever heard those teams called by their full names.
My girlfriend
before.
Did not realize that they were the Knickerbockers until today when I was talking about it.
Will you be going by an abbreviation?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain degree that's kind of out of our hands. Like, that's a little bit up to the fans and like you guys to decide. There is like the stylistic abbreviation of NYXL that we've used like in the logo, and you see it in the announce video and stuff like that. So, I mean, you know, we do like that stylistic abbreviation, but in terms of the name as a whole, like, we just wanted something that kind of represented New York and the spirit of ambition and sort of the togetherness and worldliness that we're trying to embody with the team.
I love XL as an extra large New Yorker.
Yeah.
I can tell you, yep, it is not the Little Apple. You know, it's not it's not a small city, anything like that. So I really like the abbreviation, much like Knickerbockers and Metropolitans. The full name is, you know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's not necessarily a bad thing either to distinguish yourself. So I generally speaking kind of like the branding. It's grown on me, as I think just about all of them have, right? Like, I think I like all the names now more than I did the first time I heard them.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is generally true of sports teams too, right? Like, if this were the first time you had ever heard of the Packers or
the Browns,
you know, right?
Sorry, Thorne.
Yeah, so I mean, I think those things will grow on people, and it'll just become more familiar, you know.
Are you able to tell us, were there any other names that were considered?
Sure, there were a ton of names that were considered. Like, I'm not gonna list off a bunch of the names that we thought about, but it was a huge, long process that we carefully considered, and I think everybody's super happy with what we arrived on.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I like it a lot. I mean, I don't know. I just like being like, oh, well, I know what Excelsior is. It's the state motto for New York. I'm from New York. And I mean, the branding, I like just knocked it out of the park with the branding. The colors, the scheme, the skin, all that stuff is just great. And I don't say that about all of them, because I still can't get over the fact that Valiant looks like it's John Deere. I can't do it. And then
I saw somebody on Twitter that posted like a picture of like a piece of corn, like an ear of corn next to the Mercy skin. Is really good.
That may or may not have come from our Discord. I can't confirm or deny that. Question about the roster, and you may or may not be able to answer this one, but we'll throw it out there. Is this the final roster, the locked roster for season 1, or are there any more announcements to come?
No, this is our final roster for season 1.
Gotcha. So the one question we had from that is Flower is not 18 yet, so there's no talks with him being added.
Flower is not eligible to play in season 1.
Okay.
But he is like part of our larger organization.
Gotcha. Okay. And then so we've talked to a couple of teams at this point. I think I'm losing track. I don't want to speak. I don't put words in anyone's mouth. We've talked to a number of guests who are parts of organizations who've said that they're going to be supporting a contenders team, however they logistically have to do that. I know that there's some weird mixings that can't happen, but are you guys going to be either supporting or fielding a contenders team?
Yeah, it's something that we've talked about a lot, and I think in some capacity we'll probably be involved in contenders, but we haven't really finalized what our specific plans are going to look like. Gotcha.
And this is another one we've just had a fascination with. Are the players going to be in a team house in LA for the first season, or are they going to be in different apartments when they move to LA?
That's something that we initially went back and forth on, and I think there are merits to both. Mm-hmm. For us, I think ultimately it came down to what the team wanted to do and felt comfortable doing, and they wanted to live in a house together, so we found them a house that's super awesome, and they're gonna love it.
Nice. I can only imagine how awesome that house is gonna be.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll probably do like some kind of tour video on Twitter or whatever.
Nice. I think that's about all we've got for you, Death. Is there anything else that we wanted to throw in there?
Does the house have like a guest room for any podcast hosts that might be like wanting to stop by and see a game or anything like that? No. Okay. No, I think that's definitely it. It was a short notice interview, Scott. We can't thank you enough for joining us and letting us be a small part of the announcement day and kind of the biggest day so far in New York Excelsior history. I feel very comfortable saying that. So just really appreciate it. And, from the bottom of our hearts, anytime you ever need an avenue to announce anything, say anything, address the community, you can always come on the show and speak your mind. So thank you so much.
Cool. I really appreciate it, you guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Scott, you've officially survived the hot seat. Again, I always mention it's really not that hard to do, but the floor is yours. Are there any shout outs, plugs, anything you want to throw out there?
I think I would just encourage everybody to check out our announce video if you haven't already done that. And our website is nyxl.gg. And you can see all the stuff we've been talking about, our roster and the announce video. And that can kind of be the hub for everything Excelsior as we move forward. So I hope to welcome a lot of new fans.
Yes, or as you could say, as you move ever upwards.
There you go.
Got it in there.
Nice.
Got there. But yeah, again, Scott, huge thanks again, everyone. That was Bearhands, the director of player personnel for the New York Excelsior. Go follow them. They're NYXL on Twitter and nyxl.gg for their hub. Guys, that's going to be it. Thanks, everyone, for showing up. Huge shout-outs again to Scott and to the New York Excelsior team for having him come on and talk a little bit about the team and the roster and whatnot. Hopefully, we're going to hear more from you guys in the future. But that's going to be it, guys. Again, you can always check out everything is always going to be on highnoonpodcast.com. And yeah, every link to everything anywhere ever is there. But I'm going to wrap it up. That's going to be it for Deathblow and for Bearhands. I'm the Blevins. And remember, it's high noon.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change